offer us advice, and this evening they're led by Martin Lomas, standing in for the Head of Development Management. Martin is the gentleman on my immediate left. So if we can get underway, first of all, we need to formally note the membership of the Planning Applications Committee and its chairman and vice chairman. These were laid before the Chamber at the AGM, which was just a couple of weeks ago. So can I invite colleagues that we note that membership. If we can move on, are there any apologies for absence? There are none. We're all here. Now, declarations of interest. Any declarations, anybody? There are none. Okay, are there any other declarations? There are none. Very good. In that case, we can move on. It might be helpful if I indicated the order in which we're going to consider things. In a moment or two, we're going to start with the application at Denyer Street, then Ledbury Mews North, Pembridge Crescent, then moving on to Pembridge Villas, then two applications, 54 and then 55 in Brompton Square, Lexham Gardens, and then we will continue with an application in Oxford Gardens, Wallingford Avenue, and finally Treverton Tower. So that's going to be the order we do things. So we will start with the applications at Denyer Street, and I think Derek Taylor, Derek, you're going to introduce these, yes?
Yes, I am, Chairman. Thank you. These are two applications, one for planning permission and one for listed building consents. The proposal is essentially for a third floor mansard roof addition, a side extension, a three-storey rear and side extension with a mansard roof, and then refurbishment. And it would provide a mixture of Class E floor space and 3 additional dwellings to the housing stock. You'll have seen from the report that this application was considered by the committee on the 8th of February, and the committee resolved to grant planning permission. Unfortunately, there was a key statutory notification that wasn't carried out at the time, so a further consultation period has been allowed to make up for that, and the application is then brought back before you now that that consultation period has been completed. So planning permission and listed building consent weren't issued. The committee decision was to grant them subject to completion of the legal agreement, and that would be, the legal agreement would still be a requirement. So I'll take you through the slides just to illustrate the scheme. Firstly, you can see the application site right at the centre of that aerial photograph. That's sort of taken looking in roughly a northeasterly direction. So you can see Milner Street to the top of the photograph. And then the cleared site or empty site to the bottom is part of the clearing site. So you'll have seen reference to that, I think, in the reports. And then looking now roughly in a southeasterly direction, across the application site towards Denyer Street behind, and then you can see the clearings development site to the top right-hand side of the image. And then the third and final aerial shot, this time looking roughly southwest, looking along Mossop Street, again with the application site central to the image. Moving closer in, that's the existing Rawlings Street elevation. So you can see there it's a fairly classic mid-19th century public house elevation. And that's the drawing of the Rawlings Street elevation. So that's the photograph, and that's the drawing. And then that's the proposed Rawlings Street elevation. So you can see immediately that the front elevation is retained as is. Obviously it's listed. And then that's the side addition. You can see the sort of side and rear extensions appearing to the right-hand side of the image. So that's the existing and that's the proposed. The other thing to point out is the mansard roof that you can see clearly there above the existing building and above the extension to it. And that's the existing Mossop Street elevation, so the application site is to the right-hand side of the image. And that's just closer in. And that's the drawing of the existing Mossop Street elevation. And that's the proposed Mossop Street elevation now with the extension and the mansard roof above it. And if you look closely, I think it comes out on the big screen, you can see behind there that's part of the clearings development, so you can see the scale of the clearings development. And then that's the existing Denyer Street elevation in drawing, and then as proposed. And again, on the left-hand side of that image, you can see in the blue dotted outline, that's the outline of the clearings development. And then finally some montages. So the application site, as you can see there, is basically in brick with a mansard roof, and then on the right-hand side of the image, that's the clearings development. And then the long view looking down Milner Street. And then slightly closer up one. So again, the application site obviously is to the right-hand side of that image, and then you see the clearings developments central and to the left-hand side of the image. And that was the last slide. So I'd just draw your attention to the Addendum Reports. I thought I'd just confirm that obviously the application came to committee before, and there have been some further letters now. So the total figures in terms of people who've written in are that there are now 12 letters in favour of the development, including from the Milner Street Residents Association. And then there are 2 comments and then 2 objections. So that's the total through both phases of consultation. That's the end of the presentation.
Good, thank you very much. Now, we've got registered speakers, and I think Councillor Idris and also Mr Henderson and also Mr Shinton, I think you're representing the applicant, is that right?
That's correct.
Great. I don't know how you'd like to do this, but between you, you obviously have up to 5 minutes because it's 3 plus 2 because a councillor is speaking as well. I don't know. How do you like to do this?
Shall I go? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. I am speaking on behalf of the 3 ward councillors and residents in the area. We all would like to support this application and recommend the applicant and commend the applicant for their full engagement with the community in developing it. They came to us for advice and took everything the councillors and their community suggested to them. So we thank them for that. That's why also I am very puzzled by the officer's recommendation to refuse. Last time we were here in February, the late Councillor Malcolm Spalding was in the panel and summed this application beautifully when he said, "This is wonderful because not often you see officers recommend refuse and residents oppose it." And I do agree with that. He then went on to say, "We might lose some of the roof fabric, and this is a harm. But I think this is a wonderful scheme because we are told to protect and enhance conservation areas, and by doing this development internally, we are protecting the building and future-proofing it. We are making it stronger and more sustainable, and therefore it will last longer," end quote. Mr. Chair and panel members, I agree with every word Malcolm said. We residents are not planning expert, but we live in the area and know what we like and what we don't like, and we like this application. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair, Councillors. My name is Neil Henderson and I'm acting on behalf of the applicant, Sloan and Cadogan Investment Management. I'm joined by Ed Shinton, the project architect from Atelier West, who can help us answer any specific questions about the design or heritage aspects. It is unfortunate we are in a position where this application has had to come before you again today through no fault of the applicant, but we do understand that errors of process do occur occasionally. Following the committee's decision in February to resolve to grant planning permission, the legal agreement for this scheme had progressed to the point where our client had signed the legal agreement and had paid the council's legal fees on this matter. Our client had also started to instruct a professional team to progress the detailed design phase of works. Therefore, on the basis that this committee agrees with the conclusions reached by the committee in February, our client is keen to progress the scheme without further delay. As your officers have advised, this application is for the refurbishment and extension of 45 to 47 Denyer Street and the delivery of 3 new homes. I emphasised when I spoke in February at the February committee that the application had been subject to extensive period of public and stakeholder engagement, which has significantly changed the design approach taken to the scheme as a result of the many pre-application meetings we had with local residents. The applicant has been keen to ensure local people who have to live with the design were given as much influence as possible on the vernacular. The applicant has taken this approach as they are local to the borough with their own offices just up the road from the application site. We note officers' concerns regarding the need to preserve the special character and interest of the listed building, and our client shares that objective, which is why they were guided throughout the design process by historic building consultants Donald Insall Associates. It is, of course, a subjective judgment, but it's our very clear view that the proposal does preserve the building's significance with carefully designed additions that would be subservient to the listed building, preserving its overall modesty and scale. Hopefully you will have received and seen the pre-committee briefing note from the applicant sent, which does contain some useful images of the scheme. We are very grateful for the continued support of the Milner Street Residents Association as well as the local ward councillors who have similarly extensively communicated with. We also note that there are 8 additional letters of support, and we understood there were 20 in total, but that I stand corrected by Mr. Taylor if there are only 12. There is one letter of objection, actually. I think one of the letters that was cited as an objection is actually, I think if you read it, a misunderstanding, and they've simply put it down as an objection, but it's actually supporting this scheme. The letter of objection that was raised, it can be seen that they're simply subjective judgments relating to design and heritage matters, which ultimately the committee in February concluded were acceptable. For these reasons, we would urge you to support the application and the views shared by many local residents and reconfirm the decision taken by the committee in February to grant planning permission. This will allow our client to deliver 3 new homes for the area through a high-quality refurbishment scheme without further delay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much indeed. So, colleagues, questions to the speakers, who, of course, unusually are in support of the scheme. Who would like to go first? Anyone? Arian.
Thank you, Chairman. Question to any of the supporters. I understand the objection from the planning officer is basically on the fact that I'm not really worried about the substantial harm of the architecture. I'm quite happy with the presentation. In terms of the permit free, do you want to answer that question? I don't want you to justify your opinion, but would you be happy to compromise on permit free parking or not?
I think we're assuming it is permit free.
We've agreed to
Chairman, I'm not dealing with the legal agreement myself, but a colleague of mine is. But I think the plan is that all 3 new residents will be permit free. That's what the recommendation is, anyway.
All right, thank you very much.
Anyone else wish to ask any question? No. Okay, well, very good. Thank you very much indeed. So now we have an opportunity to ask officers questions. I'd actually like to go first. I think we should take advice about the exact status of the decision that the committee came to a couple of months back in February. How exactly should that fit in properly to our thinking? Perhaps somebody could help me with that.
Well, Chairman, the decision taken in February was very clearly a resolution to grant. The application is back before you this evening, and I mean, I don't know if our solicitor would vary from this, but essentially the resolution to grant is a material consideration this evening, but you are duty bound to assess the application again this evening and be confident in the decision you take. You're not bound by the decision taken in February. You could depart from that, but it's a material consideration.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions to officers? No. Okay, well, in that case, we need to make a decision. Excuse me. I would suggest that from what we've heard here this evening, I think the decision that was made in February, it is a material consideration. I'm not really sure that I've heard anything that I feel is new or different, essentially. So I would be rather inclined to feel that the judgment probably should remain this evening, that we recognise that because there would be a certain amount of loss of historic fabric, and that would constitute a less than substantial harm. However, I think overall the public benefits of some new homes and also the design of the proposed development, I think would still remain the case that the historic pub, I think it's an 1830s building, is still very much the centrepiece of what would be an enlarged development. And personally, I would feel that on that basis, actually, planning permission should be granted. Is there anyone who'd like to express a contrary view to that way of thinking? No? Yeah, people are happy. Okay, well, I think in that case, we need to obviously reach a decision correctly. So the way we need to do this is first of all, we need to vote on the recommendation for planning permission that's in front of us. Now, of course, that recommendation is to refuse. So can I see those in favour of that recommendation to refuse? Can I see those against, please? Okay, so the recommendation to refuse is not adopted. I would like to propose a resolution that says that we should grant planning permission for the reasons that I just outlined in my thinking about the case. Now, I need to ask officers, a resolution would have to be accompanied, as well as granting permission, we'd have to set various conditions. So there would be, first of all, the standard time limit, compliance with approved drawings, and also, I think, Martin, there would need to be the legal agreement which would make the new homes permit-free. And I would have thought, I can't really see that anything else would be required. I don't know, unless you have a suggestion otherwise. I think that's basically, that would be fine, yeah?
Well, Chairman, obviously, I think you're talking at the moment about the application for planning permission.
Yes.
There would undoubtedly be quite a large suite of conditions relating to listed building details, which theoretically could go on the planning permission. Some of them might need to. there's often a practice of attaching the same conditions to planning permissions and listed building consents, but that's not necessary.
Well, okay.
What I'd suggest is that you actually did delegate to officers the authority to decide what conditions were necessary.
I think that's entirely sensible, but with the caveat that I think members, I think we are very clear what we think about this. And I wouldn't want a situation where suddenly a whole load of conditions emerged that actually made what we feel about it suddenly become incredibly difficult. Okay, I think as long as we're very clear about that,
clear enough.
I'm very happy. For the detail of conditions, I think it's entirely proper to delegate that to officers. So, if we come...
Sorry, and just one point on that. Some of those conditions, if they were conditions precedent upon development commencing, would need to be agreed with the applicant beforehand as well.
Okay, fine. All right. That's fine. Okay, so what I'd like to do is I'd now like to have a vote. I'd like to propose a resolution to grant permission for the reasons we've discussed and delegate to officers a simple set of conditions, again, exactly along the lines that we've discussed. I'd like to propose that. Would someone like to second that? Councillor Aretti seconds. Can I see those in favour of that resolution, please? Okay, so that is agreed. Now, moving on, we need to formally consider the listed building application as well. So, again, the recommendation is actually to refuse listed building consent. So can I see those who are in favour of that recommendation, please? Can I see those against? Okay, so that is not adopted either. Now, I think for listed building consent, I think we simply say the resolution is simply that we wish to grant listed building consent for similar reasons to the ones that we've just used for granting planning permission. I think, is that in order, Martin? Is that correct? Yep. Yeah, good. Okay, so I would like to propose that we grant listed building consent for those reasons. Who would like to second that? Councillor Mackover seconds that. Can I see those in favour of that resolution, please? So that is agreed. Good. Thank you very much indeed, everyone. Thank you. If we can now move on to consider the application at 7A, Ledbury Mews North, and I think that's Mr. Taylor again.
Right, this is an application for planning permission to refurbish the property with extensions to the mansard roof at the front and to the rear, with the addition of new dormer windows and roof lights also to the front and to the rear. Firstly, I thought I'd just show you a couple of images of the existing roof. The left-hand image there is taken looking along the front of the property, and you can see that the mews down to the left-hand side of the photograph. And you can see immediately that the roof to the application property in the foreground is set further back than the one immediately beyond it. The right-hand photograph shows that, again, I think very, very clearly. So you can see the property does have a flat-topped mansard roof, but it's actually a narrow version. It's set back at the rear and at the front. That's an image of the existing property, and the next slide shows how the roof would be increased in width at the front and at the rear. So you can see in the hatched form there's additional bulk proposed for the front and for the rear, which would basically bring us out in line with the neighbouring property. And you can see there that within that extended roof there are now 3 dormer windows proposed on the front elevation, and there are also 3 dormer windows proposed on the rear elevation. That's a section through the proposed additional storey with the extensions and dormer windows to the front and to the rear. and that's the existing rear elevation. I'm afraid it's not very clear, I can see. But hopefully you see enough detail to see the proposed rear elevation, which includes 3 sort of sections of glass block or glass bricks within the rear elevation, and then 3 dormer windows set above that in the rear. And to the left and to the right of the image at roof level, you can see a little bit of the neighbouring property to each side. So you can see how the property relates to the neighbours. In terms of photographs, that's a photograph taken of the rear of the property at the moment. So you can see that although the neighbouring properties do have mansard roofs with dormer windows, the application property doesn't. So that the garden immediately to the rear, as you see there, is not overlooked by the application property at all at the moment, so that they've got a higher degree of privacy perhaps than some of the other properties along there. And then that's taken looking slightly to the left, so in that image you can see the beginnings of the property on the left. There's some trellis that you can just see in front of the dormer windows. And then in that image, that's now on the right-hand side of the image, so it's looking further across. And that sort of gives you a flavour of the roofscape along there. Clearly, dormer windows in mansard roofs are part of the character of those properties. The dilemma here is that the application property doesn't have any. And I think that's the end of the presentation, Chairman.
Thank you. Now we have speakers registered. I think first of all, I think 2 objectors have registered. Are you here? Great. So when you're ready, you've got up to 3 minutes shared between you, and then we'll ask the applicant's agent to do the same. So please, whenever you're ready, do go ahead. Mr. Traherne will help you do the microphone.
Oh, thank you.
There
Sorry
we go.
about
Yep.
that. I live at 12 Chepstow Villas, which is the garden you see there, and have done for 20 years and raised my family there. Whilst I'm sympathetic to the wish for a mansard roof, the proposal as it stands would destroy our privacy through actual and perceived overlooking, ruin the appearance of our much-loved garden, and compromise all of our main living space, including bedrooms and bathrooms, all of which at the back of the house, only a few metres away from this boundary wall. Our concerns are threefold. The dormer windows. These would give rise to an unacceptable level of actual and perceived overlooking and light pollution. I'm worried that the attached conditions are insufficient to prevent this and will be difficult to enforce, given that the property will be a rental and its occupants transient. Number 2, the stairs and the large opening leading to a flat roof on the plan. There are no reasons for these to be here other than the intention to use this as a roof terrace with all the attendant loss of privacy and noise. I note a condition has been added, but don't consider this sufficient, as number 8 Ledbury Mews, which you can actually see in this photograph, never gained consent and the roof terrace there was created unlawfully. Number 3, the glass blocks in the rear elevation are uncharacteristic, of poor design and provide no function as there is already a roof light. They would lead to more unacceptable illumination of our garden, ruin a historic mews wall and add to the perception of being overlooked. The wall in question is unstable and I've real anxiety about it collapsing and injuring someone in my garden. The key objective of policy CL5 is to ensure good living conditions for occupants of new, existing and neighbouring buildings and to minimise detrimental impacts. This proposal fails to adhere to such. It significantly impacts on the reasonable enjoyment of my home and garden in terms of actual and perceived overlooking, noise activity and light pollution, and on this basis I would urge the committee to refuse the application.
Fiona Fleming-Brown, Chair of the Pembridge Association. Good evening. This application falls within the Pembridge Conservation Area, and 7 Ledbury Mews North is currently identified as making a positive contribution to the historic and architectural character and appearance of the conservation area in the area statement. Whilst it still retains some of its charm, sadly the character of the mews has already been damaged by the unauthorised roof terrace at number 8 and the significant and detrimental changes to the rear of number 9. So we don't want to see more of the mews unsympathetically developed, permanently unbalancing the architectural order here. The mews was built to front directly onto the street. It was never designed as a formal decorative terrace, so its more functional style actually reflects its former use. We particularly dislike the proposed insertion of glass bricks into the historic garden wall, which does not correspond well to the context of Chepstow Villas policy CL2. Glazed bricks are not an appropriate heritage material for buildings of this period, and they introduce additional sources of light pollution, nor do they preserve or enhance the character and appearance of the conservation area, as required by policy CL3. The addition of glazed bricks, the roof terrace, and even the high dormers harm both the character of both the mews and Chepstow Villas, and so we ask the committee to refuse this application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Now, I think the applicant's agent has registered. Is that right? Are you here, sir?
Hi.
All right, good. So in similar fashion, when you're ready, please, you go ahead as well.
Hi everyone, my name is Fahad. I'm the architect speaking on behalf of the applicant. Just to clarify, no roof terrace is actually proposed as a part of this proposal. To give you a bit of background, it's kind of, as you've seen, a modest refurbishment and extension of a 2-story mid-terrace property. We had quite an extensive pre-application session last year with kind of written feedback received in December last year. And we were advised that the overall outlook on the proposal and the principle of extending to the front and back with 3 reasonably sized dormers is kind of acceptable. And we were advised to follow the existing materiality of stock bricks, slate mansards, lead dormers, sash and case windows, which we followed. So I think to keep it simple, I'll hone in on 2 points. If we start with the mansard extension, this is the last remaining mews on the terrace that hasn't been extended. So the proposal extends the mansard to the front and back and incorporates 3 dormers to the front and back in line with the neighbouring properties. At the back, the proposal is set back 700 millimetres further back from the building line, so further back from the neighbours, to alleviate impact on the private garden, but also allowing us to kind of incorporate a roof light. The materials are slate, lead dormers, sash and case windows, keeping in line with the existing context and the advice received. And the height has been carefully considered to match the existing extensions to ensure there's no overbearing impact. And we've proactively engaged throughout the kind of pre-application process and the planning application process to amend the proposals to kind of comply fully with the advice received. In terms of the rear elevation, the existing property is north-facing, so it's incredibly dark and it's quite enclosed, so additional daylight is kind of quite a critical part of the brief. We wanted to find ways to get south light into the property while limiting impact on the private garden. So one way to do this was to pour the mansard further back from the back, but also we've incorporated those 3 small sections of glass blocks at first floor level. Those are to gain additional light into the kitchen, but glass blocks are textured and they're fixed, so they allow light in without affecting privacy because there's no view through. Additionally, we've set these glass blocks 1700 millimeters from finished floor level. So despite being textured and obscured and fixed, they're also actually above eye level to further stop any adverse impact. And that's a solution we discussed from pre-application stage. So for those reasons and the kind of more detailed reasons set out in the submitted design statement, as well as the planning officer's report, which recommends it for approval, we believe the proposals follow the relevant policies and respectfully request that planning consent is granted. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So colleagues, our chance to ask questions of either party. Who'd like to go? Ariel, and then Sam.
Thank you, Chairman. Question to the objects. Are you clear on the rooftop extension, that based on the applicant comments that there's no rooftop extension?
Yes, but you saw a photograph of a similar development in the flat next door, and they had a stairs up to a roof light, and they illegally, put a roof terrace up there.
Right.
So I don't understand the need for a huge glass opening with stairs up to a roof if the intention wasn't probably to, at some point, do the same thing. I mean, it could be a fixed roof light.
Yeah. Any comment? Thanks.
Sorry, so just to clarify, no roof terrace is proposed, and currently there's no formal staircase going up to the roof light either. This is something we discussed at pre-application stage, and we were told that the principle for a roof terrace can't be established here, so it hasn't been included in the proposals. So no roof terrace is proposed, and we'll need roof access, but no formal roof access through a staircase is currently proposed.
Cool. I'm going to ask the officer whether we could apply a legal thing on that. Thanks.
Well, that was good. Any other questions? No. Okay. In that case, thank you very much indeed. Can you turn your microphone off?
Sorry.
No, that's great. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So our chance to ask officers questions. I don't know, Arian, do you want to go first, or Sam? I think thinking along the same lines.
Yeah, just want to check with the officers, because the point raised by the objectors, Shannon, about the rooftop being illegally done at number 6, which I can see on my Google Maps, it would be a real threat to use that as a leisure or luxury open thing. So is there anything legally that we could bind it that they cannot use?
Well, yes. I mean, I think there are two important points to note there. Firstly, is that there is a recommended condition that precludes any use of the roof as a terrace. So if they were to propose that, I mean, that condition is very clear in its intent and effect. They would be in breach of that condition, and that condition could be enforced. I mean, the whole purpose of the condition is that it's there to be enforced if there was any breach of it. A second point is that to use the roof as a terrace, that they would need to put railings around the roof, which in their own right would need planning permission. So that's another way that the planning authority would have some locus as to what could happen on the roof. So that the means of enclosure necessary to satisfy the building regulations would in turn require planning permission, which of course could be refused. And then the condition is there with the expectation that the condition would be enforced. And that's why we have a fully staffed enforcement team to do just that.
Thank you. Two questions, please, to Mr. Taylor. The first, incongruous, it seems to me, the glass bricks. I can't think of many other places in the borough that I have seen anything like that. That feels like it would not preserve and enhance. Just wonder how strong the officers felt that they would preserve and enhance. And secondly, I just wonder what weight you would give, because even though it would be highly undesirable to see new dormer windows appearing at that level over that garden, the fact that the rest of the terrace, I can see two there, but I think I might have heard that a lot of the rest of the terrace has such dormer windows. What weight can we give to that in terms of conservation area?
Well, I think that, I mean, there are two subjects that you touch on in your question there. To take the last one first, I mean, the character and appearance of the conservation area is an important statutory test and also a policy test in the local plan. The prevailing character and appearance of this part of the conservation area clearly does include mansard roofs with dormer windows. So in terms of the physicality of the proposal, a mansard roof with 3 dormer windows would not be out of character with that prevailing character and appearance of the conservation area. To put it in better planning speak, the character and appearance of the conservation area would be preserved by the proposal, which is to do something very similar to neighbouring properties. So that's the physical side of it, the conservation area side of it. In terms of amenity, or if in other words, living conditions enjoyed by neighbours, that's a different thing, because obviously the fact that one neighbour a neighbour at property A is overlooked by someone's dormer windows does not in itself justify overlooking at property B from dormer windows. So the living conditions aspect has to be looked at sort of very exactly in terms of how this particular proposal would influence or affect the living conditions enjoyed by the people who live immediately behind. I think the difficulty for the applicants clearly is that the existing building doesn't have any glazed bricks and doesn't have dormer windows, so that they're proposing to introduce two new things. In terms of physicality, the dormer windows obviously are present on neighbouring buildings, so I'd suggest that the dormer windows are within the character of the conservation area. The bricks, the glazed bricks, they're not a feature of the conservation area. I don't know of any glazed bricks on other properties along there, so they're not part of the character or the appearance of the conservation area. I think the recommendation before you is only reflective of the scale of the glazed bricks. It's not a reflection of the fact that glazed bricks are somehow in themselves suitable in conservation areas. But as you can see, the glazed bricks are only a small part of the rear elevation. So I think that the officer view is that the glazed bricks would not have such an impact as to be harmful. But they're not a feature of other properties that I'm aware of, no.
Actually, can I follow that up? I'm sorry, at this stage, we are talking to officers. You've had your opportunity to speak. You can't intervene, I'm afraid. I'm sorry. I'd like to ask Mr. Taylor a point. I'm concerned about the glass brick aspect of this. I mean, it seems to me that well, personally, I think it's undesirable, okay, and unwelcome, but it doesn't seem to me to be something that's fundamental to the application. I'm wondering if there would be a mechanism whereby we could actually, in effect, exclude it and take it out of the application, because I do think it would look an odd feature to have in the, well, it would be obviously it's someone's back garden wall. Do you have any comments on that point?
Well, I mean, the glass bricks are proposed in the rear elevation at high level. You can see them here at the left-hand side within the rear elevation in section. I mean, they are a small part of the application. I think it would be possible, if you're so minded, to condition those out. I mean, I don't think they're essential. Clearly, they're part of the proposal, but the applicant clearly considers them to be beneficial. But it's certainly within your powers, I think, to add a condition removing those from it, if you're so minded.
So that would be an extra condition,
yes,
as opposed to saying that we would be amending condition 2, which is obviously compliance with the drawings. You think that would be the correct way of doing it?
Yes, it would be an extra condition.
Okay. Right.
I mean, at the moment, there's condition 11 that recommends obscured glazing for the dormer windows.
Yes.
So that would be a condition in its own right.
Yeah.
Yeah. This wouldn't be amending any other condition. This would be
it would have to be an extra condition. Okay.
So are you sure condition 2 wouldn't have to be amended? The approved plans, would they show the glass bricks?
Yes, they would do, as you can see in the section. So, yeah, condition 2 would need to be adjusted to accommodate that. It would just need the words notwithstanding, essentially.
Any other questions? Anyone like to ask? No. Okay, okay, thank you very much. Well, in that case, we need to make a decision about this. I think my own view is that I think in planning terms, we do have to give quite a lot of weight to the fact that the other buildings in the Mews have got these higher level mansard extensions. I think, obviously from the point of view of someone looking onto the back of this property, clearly it's very desirable that at the moment there isn't really anything there. But I think when you look at the context, I think unfortunately, looking at it correctly, the idea of having a new mansard extension is probably something that would have to be considered acceptable. I'm not particularly happy about the glass bricks. Personally, I think if there is a proper mechanism, as Mr. Taylor seems to indicate there is, personally I would have thought that we should condition that out. Actually, I think it's an undesirable feature which is not fundamental to the application. I think we're entitled to do it. But what do others think? What do you think? Sam?
Yes, the way I was thinking about it is exactly that, and my particular concern about the glass bricks is not just that they're incongruous, but also in their position, even though they're not absolutely huge, they're in actually that rear wall that feels part of the enclosed garden, whereas the mansard is set back and is at a higher level. So I think it would feel both on a living condition and on a character and appearance. I'm not happy with the glass bricks.
Other views? Anyone? Aaron?
I just agree with you both, basically. Yeah, right, thanks.
All right. Well, in that case, I think we can probably move to a vote. So the recommendation is to grant, but I would suggest that we add a condition, as we've discussed with Mr. Taylor, that in effect it would be the mechanism of removing the glass bricks. So they'd be removed, okay, from the scheme. And there would have to be adjustments, as I think Ms. Baring has pointed out, to condition 2, just to note the additional condition. I think we should also note condition 11, which means that the dormer windows actually are obscure glazed up to a reasonable level. So with that in mind, can I see those in favour, please, of the recommendation with those amendments, please? Those against? Okay, so that's carried by 4 votes to 1. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. If we can now move on to 30 Pembridge Crescent, please. And I think, Derek, that's you again, isn't it?
Okay, so that's the first application in the North Pack this evening. As you've seen from the reports, this is a Section 73 application to amend an existing planning permission. And you'll have seen the history set out in the reports, whereby planning permission was originally granted on appeal in 2013. And basically the saga of the property continues through this application. I'll take you through some slides. Just before I do, I'll draw your attention to the Addendum Reports, where there are 2 further letters submitted by a neighbouring resident and also a letter from Councillor Gardner. So you'll have seen those in the Addendum Reports. In relation to Councillor Gardner's letter, she points out that a condition recommended by the Environmental Health Officer has been missed, which is actually correct, which would be, if you were minded to grant planning permission, a condition requiring a noise impact assessment that should be attached to any permission. But so in terms of the first image, that's taken looking towards the application property. You can see it's a narrow fronted site, and as you'll see from the next aerial image, it's quite a long and awkwardly shaped site. You can see the front elevation in white render there, just immediately behind the tree. And then you can see the tall flank wall, which has 4 sort of, I'll call them blind windows. I don't think they ever were windows. They're an architectural device just to break up the elevation. But you can see there those quite clearly, I think, to the left-hand side of the tree in the image. From above, you can see there the long, sort of strange shape of the site. The site there is identified by the number 30 in the middle of the image, and the site actually runs right down to the bottom of that aerial image. You can see there the gardens of the properties to the right, which are clearer in that image. I think you can see in that image, you can see where the side flank wall is, and then you can see where the trees are. Those are the gardens that back onto the flank of the application site. And that's now taken from ground level. That's from number 60, looking directly across the garden of number 60, and then the back of that garden is the flank wall to the application property. That's the granted east elevation. So you can see immediately over on the left-hand side of the image that it's a small oblong-shaped open terrace with a trellis running along the side, and then you can see areas of glazing inserted within that flank wall. So that was the grants of planning permission. And what's now proposed is basically to vary the glazing. So those are the existing glazed areas and now the proposed glazed areas. So the 4 oblong areas of glazing, I'd suggest, are actually a little neater and perhaps less obtrusive than those that were granted originally. Included within the application now before you is, or are, a number of features within the boundary wall, within the flank wall. So I don't know if you can see them at that distance, but essentially there are 3 ventilation louvers. There's one there and one here and one there. And then there are also 2 flue pipes, and 2 small flues that emerge through the boundary wall between two of those louvers. So there are 3 louvers and 2 pipes proposed in the flank wall. That's a view, again, taken from the garden of number 60, sort of roughly indicating where the 3 louvers would be. I think they're pretty accurate. And then the 2 pipes would be between the 2 left-hand louvers. That's the proposed basement plan. And you can see there that there's a swimming pool at the lower basement level that takes up most of the main length of the property. And then over at the left-hand side, there's a steam room and massage room down at that lower basement level. And then above that, you can see that there's actually a kitchen, and the flues and the louvers would basically be above that level within the flank wall, facing number 60. And then that's the proposed first floor plan. And you can see there now that that's the open terrace with the trellis running along that forms part of the existing planning permission. And then the master bedroom runs along the central length of the property, and that's where the tall glazed windows would be appearing in the side elevation. And then just for completeness, this is the other side now. That's the west elevation, so that's the granted west elevation and the proposed west elevation, so that there are relatively small adjustments on that side. And that's the last slide, Chairman. Okay. And I've just been reminded that I was also going to recommend orally that condition 11 would need to be varied. That the wording in condition 11 doesn't quite make sense at the moment because it reads, shall be obscurely glazed and fixed shut up to 1.8 metres, whereas what it really means, and what it should say, is to be fixed shut, comma, and obscurely glazed up to 1.8 metres. That makes sense.
Okay, I think that's, yes, the point that Councillor Gardner, I think, makes in one of her comments. Okay, so we've got speakers registered for this. So first of all, Mrs. Sandman, are you present? Good evening, and thanks for bearing with us. So when you're ready, please, you've got up to 3 minutes to state your case.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Perfect. Same thing you did. Okay. Councillor's office, thank you. I'm going to go straight to my objections and then comment briefly. So I have 3 major objections. The first is air quality. I hugely object to the proposal that flues and louvers be inserted into my garden wall. My garden is small, not more than 9 metres in depth, has mature planting, is where we spend a lot of time as a family. The agent response to my listed objection is to move the flues to the balcony, but that is still close to my garden, and to change the location of the louvres to their first floor level, so they're further away from my garden floor. Just as a technical matter, the plan showing the revised location PA 108 revision B has not been added to the list of plans for approval, so at the very minimum that needs to be corrected. Furthermore, the applicant has not provided any information to show, should granted, that these new air bricks, which directly ventilate into my garden, would be safe. I'm not even sure what they're for. My concern is that air from the swimming pool, steam room, and kitchen, with potentially harmful chemicals, cooking, and food smells, will be vented directly into my garden. And the same point applies to the louvres and flues. Whilst they're proposed to be moved further away, they'll be still very close to my garden. At the very least, the application should be deferred and a report prepared. There should be a technical report showing what air will vent from these air brick louvres and flues and whether in theory they would be harmful, and then a condition requiring a follow-up report measuring in practice how they would work, and a requirement to cease use if air output breaches harmful thresholds and are a nuisance. But what would be most correct would be that the application should just move those bricks, louvres, and flues well away from my garden. The application has such huge external facades, so this would be easily possible and much more considerate. Noise. I think you mentioned this already, that the noise impact assessment to comply with Section 9 is missing, and that should be included, and there's no reason not to include that. Third, glazing. Planning permission initially in 2030 granted permission for larger amounts of glazing on the eastern elevation than currently proposed. However, all of that was intended to be obscured. In the variation in 2014 PP 1407745, the revised approved drawing shows less windows, but crucially shows that 2 meters of the glazing should be obscured from the first floor, from the ground floor level. The proposal now only requires 1.8 metre of obscured glazing. The planning policy CL5 requiring good living conditions, in particular reasonable visual privacy for occupants of existing properties affected by new development. This policy requirement has not been watered down since the previous policy requirements on the issue in preceding local plans. Therefore, there is no policy justification to reduce the amount of obscure glazing from 2 metres to 1.8 metres. The officer's report is simply incorrect where it states that the applicants are now seeking to change the glazing back to more akin to the originally approved 2013 parent appeal scheme. The error in the officer's report is misleading, and in event it is not if it is not corrected, would be capable of subject to judicial review. We also propose that, I'm sorry, I don't know why this is cutting in and out.
No, I'm afraid time is pretty well up, so if you'd just like to conclude,
yeah,
then that's fine.
That mechanised shutters would also be a good addition between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. to prevent light pollution disturbing, in particular, my many neighbours at number 58. Thank you very much.
Good. Yes, thank you very much. Now, I think an agent has registered to speak. Are they present? Yes. So please, in the same fashion, you go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. Managed to do it first time. Good evening, councillors. Thank you for having me. My name is Ruby Ellis and I am the planning agent for this application, here to speak on behalf of the client, who are the recent new owners of 30 Pembridge Crescent and 3 Portobello Mews. As set out in the officer report, this application does seek to amend a previously approved permission from 2014. The overall objective of our amendment application is to provide a betterment over and above the original 2014 scheme. The changes being driven by the new owner's objectives to reopen and occupy this long-term vacant property and create a beautiful, functional and lifelong family home. As councillors may be aware, the properties have been empty and vacant for many years, have fallen into disrepair, and as such, the new owners hope that the changes proposed shall help in enabling the site to be brought back into use as a residential property. We feel the proposed amendments would make the home look better than the previous permission. The ugly site hoarding at the front of the property can be removed, and as such, the proposal would improve the conservation area. The new owners and design team have been very careful to ensure that the proposed changes would not harm the amenity of any of the neighbours, and I thought it would be helpful to address some of the comments raised by Mrs. Salmon. In relation to the louvres and flues, as mentioned, we did receive these comments during the determination period, and as such, we have removed these from their original location and relocated them on the first floor terrace on the eastern elevation. An amended drawing was provided. The louvres and flues in question would also be provided with appropriate screening and would also be located behind the trellising of the terrace. It is therefore considered that these no longer present an amenity impact to the neighbouring gardens, as set out in the officer report. In regards to the windows proposed on the eastern elevation, which seek to reinstate what we consider to be the original openings of the building, a significant improvement on the previous application, which sought to completely reconstruct this elevation. This approach not only seeks to minimise the potential for disruption associated with reconstruction, but also seeks to preserve the eastern facade of the property, given its significance within the Pembridge conservation area. The windows on this flank have been designed to allow light into the internal accommodation given the constrained site. However, to prevent any overlooking or privacy issues, as mentioned, these windows will be obscurely glazed for 80% up to 1.8 metres, in line with condition 11 of the previous permission. I do not consider this to have been a change to the previous permission, as outlined by Mrs. Salmon. Just to address light pollution lastly, it's also considered that the extent of the glazing does not differ from the existing permission, and as such there will be a minimal change to this. Thank you for allowing me to speak this evening, and I am more than happy to answer any further questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions to either party? Sam?
Yes, good evening. Just getting clear on the level of obscuring of glazing. I think we heard from the objectors that it was originally 2 metres of obscuring, and now in this variation it's now 1.8 metres. I just wanted to understand, just wanted to see whether that was agreed as a fact between the two of you, but you were also saying as the agent that there was no change.
Yeah, it's my consideration that it was 1.8 metres as in the previous permission. Condition 11, I believe, outlined it. I don't believe there to have been any change from this. We are seeking to maintain the 1.8 metres obscure glazing, which allows for light at the bottom, with obscure glazing in the middle and light at the top, to allow light into both levels of internal accommodation.
Just an extension to Councillor Macko's question. Would that reduce light to Ms. Sandham that she raised in her speech? And it was written in the objection as well.
Reduce light?
Light, as in, because of the elevation.
Reduce light into the neighbouring garden?
Yes, yeah.
No, not at all. There's no changes to the elevation.
Okay, cool. All right, thank you.
I've got one other as well, and maybe this was picked up with officers rather than with the agent. But in the pack here, do you see what you believe is the latest version of where the vents and louvres are?
No, the drawings on the scheme are the old drawings. I sent new drawings on 10th May, I have it down, which shows the new location of the Louvre, so therefore the removal of them on that image there, on that drawing.
Sorry, but there's still air bricks coming straight into the garden.
There is 2 air bricks, yes, proposed about where the flue tubes are on that image. They're very minimal impact. They are purely for ventilation reasons for the lower ground floors. I don't have a specific design of them just now, but it is something we can provide.
Can I ask the agent? I'm referring to the Addendum Report, okay? And, sorry, it's slightly difficult. A couple of pages in, there's a photograph. It's showing essentially looking out at the back garden. And there's a table and there's cushions and things. And then on the rear garden wall, there are 3 sort of red marks. Now, can you, is that where these sort of air bricks are going to be? Is that right?
So I've only seen this image tonight,
Right.
but the air bricks...
Yes, that image, yes.
Yes.
I beg your pardon,
So
yeah.
the air bricks would be at a similar height, yes, but much less intrusive than a Louvre or a flue. And there's only 2 of them, and they are the size of a brick, a standard stock brick.
Okay, so in other words, the red splodges are they're roughly in the right place
Roughly
in terms
in the
of
right
height,
place, yes.
but you're saying there'd actually only be 2.
There's only 2,
and,
yes.
And in fact, they're a kind of air brick
Yes.
that is coming up from the lower basement levels.
Yes.
Okay, all right, I understand. All right, thank you very much indeed for that. Any other questions? No. Okay, well, thank you very much indeed, both of you. So, our opportunity to ask officers about this. Who'd like to go first? Who'd like to head up? Sam.
Maybe I can just pick up on the 2 points that I raised with the speakers before. The first being, is there any difference in the height of the obscuring of the glazing between the previous application and this one? Was it 2 metres previously and 1.8 now? And secondly, and perhaps most significantly for the discussion, is have we got the correct plans in front of us that the agent referred to as the updated repositioning of the louvres and vents?
Well, I think obviously there has been discussion and things seem to have moved on a little bit in terms of the flues and the louvres. I mean, I don't know whether it's our mistake or what's happened along the way, but certainly at the moment they don't seem to be part of the application. So, I mean, clearly the drawing exists because everyone seems to have seen it. If the committee were minded to go down that route, then the only way I think we could bring ourselves up to date would be to add a condition requiring that to happen. And then through that condition, it would be possible to approve the details of the air bricks. And so that would be a notwithstanding type condition again. So the louvres and the flues would not be approved, and there would be a condition requiring details of the air bricks, which could be the existing drawing or a close variant of it. So that would be the way to catch up with that. In terms of obscured glazing, I think it's open to the committee to decide whether 1.8 or 2 metres would be appropriate. I mean, I think 2 metres would make it impossible, really, for someone to see unless they were standing on a chair. 1.8 would probably make it very difficult for most people to see over. Perhaps a very tall person could see over 1.8 metres. I mean, in other words, their eye height would have to be above 1.8 metres, which I think would be fairly unusual, but possible. 2 metres would obviously preclude that completely.
Thank you. But just for clarity on the vents and louvres point, so you are saying that we would have the opportunity, if everything else was was agreed to grant this, but exclude what's showing on the plans as vents and louvres, and say that those are not permitted at all. But I was getting the impression that there were alternative locations that had been proposed for them. How would we know what we were approving if they're not on any plan in our pack now?
Well, we wouldn't until we received the drawing that would be required by the condition. So, I mean, as I understand it, there would be 2 air bricks rather than 3 louvers. I don't have the detail of those air bricks this evening, so the condition would be requiring that detail.
Can we look into
if
the
you
new
wish,
drawing?
that detail could be brought back to committee as well.
Sorry, I was going to say I'm getting a bit uncomfortable about this. We're talking about a plan that doesn't seem to have made it to the planning department and is not... Sorry, can you hear me? And is not before the committee tonight. You know, obviously these louvres and flues are required to be somewhere. It looks like at the moment they've been moved to, was it the first floor, can't see my note, terrace level. You know, I think this is something that should be deferred so that everybody is looking at the correct drawings, so that everybody knows exactly where the louvres and flues are going to be and where the air bricks are going to be, so that you can make an informed decision. I'm just a bit nervous about people talking about plans that you haven't seen even. So yeah, I'd recommend that you defer it so that the application can come back to committee with the correct drawings.
Yeah. Arian, do you want to have a comment?
So I just want to check, can we just refer to the new drawings, probably look up in the emails or whatever sent by the agent? Would that be a agreeable hearing, or?
Just to clarify, Chairman, I've just looked at the application file and we don't have those suggested drawings on the file, which suggests that they haven't been received yet by the planning authority.
Okay, well, yeah, thank you for that. I mean, I think my own feeling about this is that the exact positioning of these flues and air bricks, I think, is actually quite important. In different circumstances, I think they would be small matters that could be left to officers to sort out via a condition. But I think in this case, because there is an obvious impact on amenity of neighbours, and I think on that basis it's something that really we do have to have the details in front of us to know exactly what is proposed, I would have thought. So I think, I don't know, does anyone particularly disagree with that type of point of view? No? Okay, so I think probably the correct thing for us to do is to say we should defer the application, and then if there are indeed proposals to adjust it, then that sounds very positive actually. Then that would come back to a later committee. Now I'm just thinking, do we need to formally adopt a resolution to defer?
Yes, we just need a proposal and seconder.
Yes.
Propose and second in the normal way, and then just to defer.
Yes. Okay. All right. So I don't. Councillor McAvoy, would you care to propose the deferral?
Yes, I propose.
For the reasons that we discussed. Is that seconded? Councillor O'Durian seconds that. Can I see those in favour of deferral for those reasons, please? So it's agreed that we defer that. Thank you very much indeed.
May I just make just one comment on where this drawing is located? Because it's
well, I suggest you take that up with officers later.
Okay.
You do that tomorrow. That'll be fine.
I think it has been submitted, but it's appended to a
yeah,
letter.
No, okay. Yeah. It's not. Yeah.
Okay.
You take it up with the officers tomorrow. Thank you. So if we can now move on to the application at 5 Pembridge Villas, please. Derek.
Right, so this is the second application in the North Pack, and the proposed development is essentially the insertion of 4 dormer windows within the roof above the nursery at the back of the building. You can see there in the first photograph the aerial image, and if you look to the top right-hand side of the aerial image, you can see that there is a pitched roof running across the site with a centrally placed lantern light at the centre of the roof running along the ridge. And I think it is useful in the aerial image you can obviously see the proximity of buildings that surround the church centre on 3 sides. That's a closer-up image of one part of the roof. The red star indicates where one of the dormer windows would be slotted in, so that there are 4 altogether, basically 2 at each end of the roof, 2 on each side of the roof. So that's one dormer window. Then looking in the opposite direction almost, again, a red star would indicate where there would be a dormer window under the proposal. So you can see the quite dominant in the roof is the lantern light that runs along the ridge at the moment. And in each case, the dormer window is a relatively minor addition to the roof in physical terms. And that's, I think, useful again to show the proximity around the boundary of the site. And in plan form, over at the right-hand side of the image, you can see the 4 dormers now, in terms of 1 in each corner of the pitched roof. And then in that image, you can see a section through the roof at the back, and you can see the dormer windows popping out on each side of the pitch. And then finally, the front elevation, you can see one of the 4 dormers is present at the right-hand side of the church in the elevation, and then another one there at the left-hand side. Obviously, those are set well back, but in elevation, that's what you would see. And then just a closer-up section, just so you can see again. The dormer windows would be lead-clad on each side, and they would be obscurely glazed on their front. And that's the last slide, Jim.
Okay, thank you. Now, Mrs. Siddle, thank you for waiting. So when you're ready, please go ahead, and you've up to 3 minutes.
Thank you, and good evening, everybody. So I represent one of the immediately the closest property to Chepstow Place. I'm also speaking on behalf of 3 other objectors, and all of us reside on the side that is not shown in this permission. So there's 4 dormer windows, and 2 of which are southeast orientated windows, and they have not been, all the plans are deliberately not showing our side of it, even though we are the closest properties to it. So I'd like to make that point. And also another point of clarification is that it's called a nursery. It is not a nursery. It was a nursery 16 years ago, and then the developers tried to change the purpose from a church hall back to a nursery, but they are now advertising it as a gym stroke rehabilitation centre. So it's not being developed as a nursery. So our real objection is, collectively, is about the fact that we believe that the planning officers have not had sufficient access to view the impact on our side of the building when it comes to the increased sense of encroachment of these dormer windows. It even says in the application that side of the building is not visible from the public spaces in the street. So the decision is really, or the recommendation is being made on, 2-dimensional drawings, as you've seen there, that don't even take into account the proximity of these windows. The reason I'm sitting here, for example, is that I've measured out that this is the proximity to our bedroom and bathroom window from about this level. So it's very, very close. And it's a strange structure and a strange angle that comes into our house. And so they've, in the, against all 4 houses' objections, that the counter-argument on the sense of enclosure was three grounds. One, that the dormer windows were not higher than the roof, but our counter to that is, well, when you're this close, even if the roof is the level of that balcony, if I was stand up at 2 meters high and 2 meters wide, that's still a sense of enclosure. I still feel that sense of enclosure, particularly if I've got the lights on and that's shining into our room. Even though they've had a condition for non-reflective light, all the manufacturers of non-reflective light say that that only cuts the light by 5%. And then the other defence is that half of that window is done by a parapet wall. Well, they haven't had access to it, and that is not true. The parapet wall is quite small, and so it's probably like only 20% is covered by the parapet wall. So those are already our grounds, that there's an increased sense of enclosure. We believe that this development, this application brings very little advantage to the developer. As the officer already mentioned, 60% of the roof is already a lantern light, so that means it's all glass. So there's plenty of light coming into that development, and so there's no difference. And then finally, that's at the expense of the negative effects for all four of us neighbouring properties. So thank you for your time and attention.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions, colleagues? Yeah, I can ask. Just make sure I've understood it right. So the condition 5 in the report is that they have to be low glare, obscure glazing, and it also has to be fixed shut. Is your argument that the degree of sort of low glare is not enough? Is that you're saying that? If I can just understand that.
Yeah, I think it's about the sense of enclosure. So the first part is just the physicality of the windows right next to your windows, pushing much closer. And the second part is that will be ever more present with light shining in winter nights or straight into our bedroom and bathroom windows, which you can't preserve by non-reflective glass.
Okay, thanks. Arian.
Mr. Sindel, you probably sent a photo of a view from 2 steps of place. Is that your bedroom?
We sent one from the bedroom and one from the bathroom.
Yeah,
that's the bedroom, yeah.
Right. Could you roughly estimate what would be the measurement in terms of the size from your bedroom to that proposed window? Roughly about what distance will be? About 4 meters, 6 meters?
I'd say from the bedroom about 6 and from the bathroom 3.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. So, colleagues, questions to officers? Any questions? Hamish.
Thank you, Chair. Just a clarification, really, on the response in the report to objection number 2. This is about the potential conversion in the future of the glazed windows to clear. And in the response, it says that in the unlikely event of a breach, occupiers will be able to contact the planning enforcement team to require compliance for a period of up to 10 years before a change to clear glazing would be exempt from enforcement action. So, in general, I just wanted to understand, does that mean those conditions we're imposing are actually time limited?
Yes, it does. I mean, essentially, if a condition hasn't been enforced within 10 years, then it becomes immune from enforcement action. I think why did the government do it that way? I think the idea is that if no one had actually complained, or if a planning authority had not taken it upon itself to enforce it within 10 years, then it probably isn't that bad.
Okay.
So that's a national rule, isn't it? It's not local. It simply means that 10-year immunity is gained if something hasn't been enforced on a condition in that period.
Okay, I think I may have potentially misunderstood the way this was written here. What I took that to mean is that after 10 years, somebody could change it to clear and it could not be enforced. That's what the response seemed to imply.
Right, that wouldn't be the case. I mean, I think what the officer is trying to say is if it hadn't been enforced within 10 years...
That's what I wanted to clarify. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, I think, no, thank you for making that clear. Yes, it's very much not the case that after 10 years you could suddenly put in clear glazing. That wouldn't be the intention at all. Any other questions or points? Tim?
Just a very quick question on the inside of that building. So is there a ground floor and a first floor? Is there activity on the first floor? Can people actually look outside of those windows, or is it one big open space to bring in more light?
I mean, essentially, at that part of the building, there are 2 floors, so these would be intended to provide light for the upper floor. I don't think you can see that from any of these images, but no, if you look in the pack, I don't have a slide to show it, but the last drawing in the pack before the public comments, that shows a different section taken through the rear roof, and so you can see there the relationship of the proposed dormers to the floor height, so that they would be high level dormers. So it's the last drawing before the public comments.
Yeah. Yes. So quickly, there is actually a second floor where people walk around, do activities, and be able to see outside of those windows, basically.
Yes. Yeah. There's 2 floors.
Okay. So we need to make a decision. What do people feel about this? I think it's quite near neighbouring properties, but given the nature, the nature of the buildings, and the fact that it's going to be obscure glazed and it has to be fixed shut, I think that probably is on balance, is probably something that's sufficient. But I don't. What do others think? What do other people feel?
But also the proposed window is actually looking upwards, unless someone come closer and try to sneak through, it wouldn't be overlooking to the other properties. If you look at the roof elevation looking upwards.
Well, if it's obscure glazed,
yes,
people can't do that.
Can't do that. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, my view is like yours, Chairman, is that one would wish things not to happen, but actually it would be, even though you would notice it, is the degree of harm so sufficient that we could actually use policy to refuse it, and I don't think it quite gets to that point. So I'm thinking on balance, I find it has to be acceptable.
So for me, the distance between the other building is actually a bit too close, and for that reason, I think I'll vote differently.
Sorry, the recommendation is to grant with the conditions attached. Can I see those in favour of the recommendation, please? Can I see those against? 3. Sorry, and those against? 2. So that's 3 in favour and 2 against. So permission is granted. Thank you. If we can move on now to the application 54 Brompton Square, and I think Martin Lomas, Martin, you're going to present this actually. Yeah. Let's just have a very short break, a couple of minutes break, and then we'll come back. Yeah, that's good. Actually, Arian, can you try and find another bottle of water? Okay, I think we can make a start again. Now, I think, Mr. Lomas, we've got two pairs of applications, 54 and 55 Brompton Square. Now, the intention, were it to be all granted, is that that would be a legal agreement that everything would be carried out at the same time. I think on that basis, it's probably sensible that we just have one presentation, which Martin will do in a moment. But then we have to take the 4 separate decisions. So, Martin, when you're ready, please go ahead.
Yep. Thank you, Chairman. You stole my opening lines, so I'll move on to the main presentation. So, in this first slide, this is an aerial image showing the 2 properties, 54 and 55 Brompton Square, at the front on the left, facing the square, and then you can see the rear elevation on the right-hand side. And what you can see in these images is the extent to which properties on the square have been extended in various forms, both upwards and outwards at the back, and the height of the 2 existing properties and how they sit lower than the immediately adjacent, but also a number of other properties further along the square. This is an image looking up at the 2 properties here. You can see how at the moment their main front facade sits a story lower than the property on the left hand side, and a story and a half lower than the property on the right hand side. You can just make out the existing mansard across those 2 properties. Peering over the top there, the proposal is to remove this mansard, build up the main facade to create an additional story, and then rebuild a mansard on top of that. So here you can see in this slide the removal of the existing mansard, hatched red, and then as proposed, where the existing mansard is, you now have a full story continuing the facade up, and then the new mansard level above that, and you can see the height of the adjacent properties relative to the proposal. And then this is just looking at the proposal from the rear, so again the red hatching denoting the demolished existing mansard, and then the proposal in terms of increasing that rear main wall and the mansard, new mansard extension sitting on top of that. And then finally in section, you're just seeing the same thing, the red denoting the demolition of the existing, and then that full height additional story with the new proposed mansard on top. And that concludes the presentation.
Thank you. Now, there are no speakers for this. I just wanted to quickly note, because there have been some objections from people who live in the Mews properties that are behind the buildings. But I think we can see from those photos that it's quite clear that the properties on either side of Brompton Square have over the years been extended upwards. So in a way, this is filling in a slightly odd-looking gap in terms of the townscape, rather than creating something that's suddenly higher or looks very very incongruous. Are there any questions anyone would like to ask about this? No. No? Okay. In that case, I think what we can do is we can move to a vote. Now, I will take these in the order that they are in our pack. So, first of all, we have...
Chairman, I'm very sorry.
Yep.
Before you do the votes on the planning permission, can I just point out
Yep.
that there was a change in the late reps with regards to the legal agreement and when it needs to be completed by.
Okay.
It's changed from the 21st of August to the 30th of September, so just to make that point. So
right.
that's the second part of each recommendation
Yes.
for the planning permissions.
Yes, because, yeah, okay. All right, so the legal agreement is, we're saying the latest date is now...
It's the 30th of September 2022.
Right,
now.
30th of September, rather than, we've got 21st of August at the moment. Okay,
That's
all right. And that applies to the planning
Both the
permission
planning
for
permissions.
55 as well?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Planning permissions.
All right, good. Well, with that noted, so the recommendation for 54 is to grant, obviously with the legal agreement as we've just discussed. Can I see those in favour of that recommendation, please? So that is agreed. If we can now move to consider listed building consent for number 54, and that is set out in the report. The recommendation is that we grant listed building consent. Can I see those in favour of that, please? So that is agreed. We then move on to number 55, Brompton Square, and again the legal agreement we will say the end 30th September. So with that in mind, the recommendation is to grant planning permission with that legal agreement date. Can I see those in favour, please? So that is agreed. And secondly, for 55 Brompton Square, listed building consent, if I can see those who are in favour of granting listed building consent. So that is also agreed. Thank you very much indeed. If we can now turn to 98 Lexham Gardens, and I think that's back to Derek.
Yep. Okay. I need just three slides to show you for this one. Firstly, just to give you a flavour, that's the front elevation, and you can see the application relates to the top floor there of the property. You can see it sort of outlined in the red dots. And that's the existing floor plan at the 4th floor level. So you can see there's room K, room L, and then at 8.7 square metres, room M. Those three bed-sitting rooms would be converted to form 2 studio apartments, and you can see the studio apartments in their plan form there. And that's the proposal.
Okay. Any questions about this? I'd like to raise an issue which I did mention earlier. The issue about parking permits, because there's a recommendation. The recommendation says that we should have a legal agreement, meaning that the 2 new studios that are created can't have a parking permit. But at the moment, my understanding is that the 3, although they are, well, one of them in particular is really a small room, but those 3 units do actually have the ability to apply for a parking permit. So the number of units entitled to a parking permit is actually going down by 1. I don't know, is there an officer response to that? Seems a bit odd to my mind to do that.
Yes, well, I mean, in pure numbers, I mean, 3 existing bed-sitting rooms would become 2 studios, so yeah, they're going down by 1. I did check this with our highways team, just in case there was much to be discussed on it in their opinion. And actually, they said that in current data hasn't changed insofar as the car ownership levels in bed-sitting accommodation is still sort of markedly below car ownership levels in self-contained flats, and therefore, in their opinion, there would be it may be one less bedroom or one less unit, but in terms of car ownership, there'd be a significant increase in the likelihood of a car seeking to park on neighbouring streets. So they reaffirmed the requirement for that agreement.
Okay, thank you very much. So, colleagues, is there anyone interested in pursuing my idea, or am I going on about something I'm wasting my time, and you're not interested.
About the existing car permits.
Yeah, yes, I was putting to officers the idea that the current accommodation, which is 3 units, they're entitled to a parking permit, and it's actually going down to 2. So my argument was, well, surely if you're actually reducing the number of people, why do you then suddenly take away a parking permit from the 2 new studios? Do you see what I mean? I don't know. Does anyone else have any thoughts about that? Or?
Well, I agree with that, and probably perhaps remove that condition about the legal issue about the free parking permit. So I could propose that. If that.
What do others think about this? Just quickly, how do people feel?
For me, if someone had made, if the applicant had made a particular point saying it was significant for them to retain permit, then I would have looked at that case. But I think as it seems to be not a problem for the applicant, my own feeling would be just to leave it as it is. Yeah.
Okay, well in that case, I think it sounds as though we don't want to pursue this, and I certainly wouldn't recommend not supporting the recommendation on the basis of an argument about parking permits. So the recommendation is to grant planning permission, but with a legal agreement that says the 2 new studios are permit-free, and also I think there'll be a point about no further amalgamation, isn't there?
Yes.
Studios to remain as studios in perpetuity.
Yes. Yes, so that would form part of the legal agreement as well. So can I see those who are in favour of the recommendation, please? Okay, so that's agreed. Thank you. If we can now turn to the application Oxford Gardens.
This one is an application for planning permission to extend the existing basement and inserting a light well and a small extension. The first slide I'm showing you there is a section through the existing property. So you can see that at the moment, towards the left-hand side of the image, that's the front of the property, there is already a basement level that contains a bedroom and a gym and a plant room. Underneath the rear of the property at the moment, there is no basement level where it runs down to the garden. And then the proposal basically is to form a new basement level beneath the rear part of the property. So you can see there it's a single storey proposed to be inserted beneath the rear. The section line goes through the media room that would provide as proposed at the moment. In plan form, that's the existing basement plan on the left-hand side, and then the ground floor plan to the right-hand side. So you can see at the moment there's a sort of void under the rear left-hand side of the property. And then in the proposed basement plan, that would now be filled in, so that's where the media room would sit, that you just saw the section through. So that's the existing and that's the proposed. And that's just a closer-up image, so you can see how it relates to the other basement facilities.
Thank you. Any questions about this? Seems, I think, fairly straightforward. Any questions? No. Okay, in that case, I think we can move to a vote. So, recommendation is to grant. Can I see those in favour of granting, please? So that's granted. Thank you very much. If we can now move to Wallingford Avenue, please.
And then to 6 Wallingford Avenue. So the first slide there is slightly blurry. Sorry, I couldn't get sort of tighter image for it, but that's the rear elevation of the property. So you can see there it's the standard building form along Wallingford Avenue, where there are deep sort of interjoining light wells running along the side of each property, and quite deep closet wing extensions. That's sort of looking directly along the light well, along the side of the property. And that's an image taken from the window you see at the end, so that the sash window you see at the inner end of the light well is where that photograph is taken from, looking back out towards the garden. And then in terms of the proposal, you can see there in rear elevation the infill proposed for that light well. And that's this in side elevation. So essentially it's a sloping roof with, you can just see the roof lights set within the roof slope. And it slopes down to the party wall to the adjoining property. And that's the proposal.
Okay, thank you. Any questions about that? No? Okay. Well, in that case, the recommendation here is to grant planning permission with the conditions set out in the report. Can I see those in favour, please? So that is agreed. And then finally this evening, Treverton Tower.
Right, so this last application relates to Raymead Tower and Treverton Tower, which are two towers. You can see them from Ladbroke Grove, just on the west side of Ladbroke Grove. The two towers were built together so that they have the footprint that you see there in the aerial image. And that's Treverton Tower in elevation, and then Raymead Tower. So you can see that the architecture is the same as they were built as a pair. That image shows in red that's the proposed demolition. So in other words, it's proposed to take out all of the existing windows, as you see there, and then to basically replace them. So that's an existing pass elevation, and then that's a proposed pass elevation. So essentially the window openings remain the same, the glazing pattern remains the same, everything remains the same apart from two things. One would be a change in material from the existing metal frames to UPVC frames. And then the other change is that the UPVC frames are slightly thicker, as you can see in those blown up images. But the glazing pattern remains consistent. It's just the frame that changes. And that's the last slide.
Very good. Any questions about that? No? No. Okay. Yeah, I think there's actually no objections, and in fact, a couple of people actually supportive of this, so that's worth noting. So the recommendation is to grant. If I can see those in favour, please. So that is agreed. Good. Thank you very much indeed, everyone. Thank you.